welcome back to another Brew and Ink podcast. This is an Interbrew episode, which means spoiler alert. And this is going to be an episode on WandaVision Season 1, and you're going to hear some points from me, SM's Freehand. You're going to hear Britt Mooney.
What's up?
MB Mooney. And you're also going to hear from Katie.
Hey there.
And we have been chomping at the bits to get this one done. We've been excited about the season. We gave ourselves some extra time to watch through it and rewatch through it for some of us. And I think we've got a good episode for you guys tonight. WandaVision was pretty exciting. And I would say maybe not groundbreaking, but the way that it told story was unique.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's been done before like this, especially not in the MCU, not in the Marvel universe. But taking, I had two things that I really liked, and the level of parody that they were able to do on sitcoms throughout the decades, and do it well, like so where you just look at it and you go, oh, this is like a mashup of three different, old sitcoms that I know of for each episode. But then also the overall stories that they're telling as well, the emotional connection between Wanda and Vision, and then eventually her two kids and the sacrifices she has to make. But also, is she the hero in this story, or could she more possibly be the villain of the story? We'll get to that as well. But your hot takes, what do you guys think?
Well, first we need to do a hot take on what we're drinking. What are you drinking over there?
I have a Orpheus Brewing. You can't sit there. Orpheus Brewing Transmigration of the Soul.
Oh yeah, you like that?
Yes, a double IPA, 10% ABV.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a leftover can of the same Abracadabra, which fits WandaVision better, I think.
Yes, Abracadabra. And Transmigration of the Souls.
Oh, there you go.
Hey.
So this deliciously magical Belgian beer. So I'm going to pop that open for you real quick. So that's what we're drinking. Katie, what are your hot takes? Or are you drinking anything? Well, we didn't.
No, but I'm going to go get a glass of water in a minute. I'm really thirsty. Hot takes on WandaVision. Gosh, that was a really enjoyable and fun ride. It was surprising and engaging, and they played with the media extremely well. Yes. I was going to say, there's an Easter egg that I thought was fantastic, but I just double checked things and it wasn't actually an Easter egg at all. But, it sure feels like it. Just the story and the characterization and the drama, especially toward the end, and the puzzle of it. I felt like I was solving a puzzle as we went on, and that was a lot of fun.
For sure. And the way that this season 1 is almost like two different complete parts. Like the first 4 episodes are almost its own unique style. And episode 4 is when it starts really kind of branching out into more of like the real world, what's actually crazy happening and revealing stuff. But then the second 4, like the last 4 episodes are just, they stop pulling, stop pulling punches. They start just throwing all kinds of craziness at you. I remember it was episode 7, if I'm not mistaken, or 8, where, our kids have been kind of watching through the season with us, but at that one, they're like glued to it going, what are we watching? As these witches have their life sucked out of them fall down as corpses. That was much different mood and atmosphere than episode 1, where you have like a 1950s sitcom like I Love Lucy going on the whole time. Much different beginning.
Yeah.
But I think what I agree, like what they did with the story was really good. Like I felt the feelings. I saw what they were going for. and I thought the story was, done well. I enjoyed it, but there were parts of it where, like in the last two episodes, I'm like, hold on, they're leaving things open here. They didn't close this loop, or they set something up and you're just waiting for it to happen, and you're like, wait, you just completely glazed over that whole thing. And I think that maybe they did it to try and make it more emotional, but then it just leaves you confused towards the end. But I think what they did with the medium is really the strength of this season, of this series, because as far as I know, there's not going to be a season 2 of this. This is one
No,
and
it
done.
leads into Falcon and what's his face, Winter Soldier,
which comes out tomorrow.
Yeah, and it also leads into the Doctor Strange movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's it.
I feel like
she's going to be. She's going to be in the Doctor Strange movie. She's going to be like one of the characters in whether she's the villain or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I think she's kind of the antagonist.
I think she's going to be
in that one
antagonist too.
But I think what they did better than the story itself was how they used the medium and how they told story through parody of old sitcoms. And every episode being a different decade of sitcoms. It was just, nostalgic for people that grew up watching it. So you get that right off the bat. But then also the way they used it to tell the story, like episode 5, I think it was, they had babies. They just had babies, like twin boys.
Yeah. And then they grew
at
up
the beginning
overnight.
of episode 5, they're still babies. And then all of a sudden they, like in a blink of an eye, turn to young boys, and they jump into just the intro song. And through the intro song, they're kind of like introducing you like, hey, these kids are now young boys. Like all the pictures and everything, they're now young boys. And then they just go right back into the story from there. Like, yeah, you're just gonna have to believe this. This is what's happening.
Well, and that was kind of a parody of a lot of TV shows over the years too. Like a kid would be born, and then like the next season, they're all of a sudden 2 or 3 and can talk, and they're more interactive. Like, TV shows would do that. So no, I think that one of the things that they did really well, and I don't know how much Mandalorian had to do with this, but like with Mandalorian, having it come out week after week, there was a whole week for people to talk about it and have
the internet
different theories about what was going to happen. And so WandaVision really played with that. Like WandaVision did more of that, I think, on purpose. And I think that's part of what made it really enjoyable is that we had that time in between. Obviously, I think Katie more binged it, but like when you watch it, it's kind of like that old way of watching television. We used to do like, it's going to come on Friday night, and what's going to happen, and you're looking forward to it, and you're making a schedule.
You're watching it with your friends for the first time that day.
And so they played with that with the Easter eggs and the little hints and then the whole internet would be abuzz for a week and like, oh, what did that mean? And what did that, who's the real villain, and what really, all the little different questions that people would have a little buzz about. I think they did a lot of it on purpose. As far as what loops they didn't close, I'm wondering if they are going to close them in the Doctor Strange movie, but I agree. There's one main, and we can get to it, but there's one main thing that happened at the end that I think was not well done. But
let's talk about the things we liked first, and then do that. We can go. I really liked the way that they would transition from campy sitcom to all of a sudden mess with your mind creepy. Like, it would be like in a scene where they're just talking, and then Vision's like, something really weird happened with the neighbors. They were talking about, trying to escape and I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden the scene just skips and it like jumps back, and you're like, is there something wrong with my streaming? Like, what just happened? Did it skip? What? And it was Wanda like screwing with Vision and like erasing and going backwards kind of in time, like resetting the scene so that he says the things that she wants him to say. And but there would be moments like that, like where someone was calling out her name through the little radio in the middle of it was like a dinner party or something. And it just goes from like being they suck you into this very sitcom like storyline. Everything is just centered around kind of what's happening in the sitcom moment of it. And then all of a sudden something breaks through the WandaVision reality to leave this like creepy, like the guy in the beehive, like all of a sudden he comes out of the beekeeper suit. So the way they transitioned from like sucking you into being like, oh, I'm just watching a sitcom. And how are they going to, get over this zany antics that they have going on, hijinks, if you will. And then all of a sudden you've got like a skip in the reality or in what you're watching. And you're like, wait a minute. Did I see that correctly? What's going on?
My kids would freak out when that happened. Like Micah and Elisha and Hosanna would be like, oh my gosh, did you see that? That means, and they would come up with their own little theories. And it was just so fun. My kids were in from episode 1. My kids were coming up with their own theories, and Micah was searching the internet and trying to figure it out. Like it became a family event. And Winter Soldier Falcon is going to be the same thing tomorrow night. We're just waiting for it. And I think it's a smart move by Disney. I loved streaming stuff and binging stuff, but having it like that and having some time in between the episodes has been a real cool thing. So
one of the scenes that I really liked, one of my favorite scenes, is towards the end. It's at the end of episode 5 when Wanda, Vision's onto her, and he's like, look, I just talked with what's his name at the office. Like, I unblocked him from your control, and I spoke with the man on the inside, and he's in pain, and we got to fix whatever you're doing. And she just wants to like not have the conversation. And as he's trying to argue with her, she starts rolling the credits of the sitcom, and the credits are rolling over them having this argument, and it follows them into the next room. And then the credits completely disappear. And they're like, now you're in this, like, you're not in the sitcom anymore. They're full on having like an argument, both flying in the air, getting in each other's face. And you're like, what are they doing to my mind right now? What just happened? But I loved it.
Well, and I love that. What's her name? The scientist woman, young
Darcy.
woman. Yeah, Darcy
is my favorite.
So here's some things they did well. They brought back some kind of secondary characters from other movies that were really fun.
Yes. Darcy was from Thor.
The FBI guy
was from Ant-Man.
And then Darcy. So they brought those people in, and the fact that she was getting into the show, the fact that she was like becoming a fan of this show, again, just such a great. A lot of the little things they really did do well,
and it was an important part of her character too, because in the end she ends up inside of WandaVision. She's like, as much as I love the show, I didn't really want to become a character, but she's talking to Vision. When they're together in the car by themselves, and she said, I've been watching this for the past, few days or week or whatever. And she's like, the only thing that I know is real is your and Wanda's love for each other. She's like, and that's what this is all about. That's the real thing here. And so like to be able to put that, through the secondary character's point of view and then say it back to the characters, I think it was an important piece that she played there. Another character that was a pulled from another movie was Monica Rambeau, a lieutenant. I think Monica Rambeau.
Yeah, she's
the daughter of the best friend of Captain Marvel, so she was from the Captain Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I liked how they were pulling in these characters that they've had well established. You know who they are. You don't have to do any backstory and stuff like that. But they fit into the situation quite well.
Well, we are in such a unique time of entertainment history, right? I mean, Marvel already made history with like the biggest storyline
ever told
ever
in the
done
cinematic,
and they did it well. Like it's one thing to do something for the first time. It's another thing to do something for the first time and like
And
95% of it was just A plus, Yeah. And so all of that to say, but at the same time, being able to come back into TV in a different way than just a regular show. Like they had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which it's really tragic that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't really get more connection to the movies, because like if they had more connection to the movies, then I think that could have really played well.
Yeah, I was into Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the first 4 seasons. I think season 5 was the Ghost Rider season, and at that point I realized this show is not going to directly connect to the movies. There's no like real influence here.
Yeah, it totally jumped the Ghost Rider in that season. But and they tried on Netflix, but the problem is that Netflix had control. So Netflix had the rights to these characters to make their little shows, but the quality was hit or miss. In some cases, it was a big miss, and so I think Marvel learned from that, thinking we just have to do it. Like now that we have the rights to all these characters, we're just going to have to do it and do it right. So being able to kind of have that expanded universe and in all these different formats. Specifically TV and movies at the same time. It's such a fun thing because in the old days, because I'm old, in the old days, here's what would happen is you would have a movie and they would decide to do a TV show based on the movie, but they would have different actors in all the parts. Like the movie actors would put up they'd put up their noses at coming on TV.
Oh, I can't be on TV.
And like there was if ever an actor or actress became popular enough on TV that they like translated into movies, they never went back. Like they never went back to TV, And so we just, but now the quality of entertainment on streaming can be just as good as a movie, and especially now during COVID when people aren't even going to the movies. And so this is where they're going to see a lot of their entertainment. It's just a really unique time in history for entertainment, and to see it happen and enjoy it. I think it teaches us a lot as writers, that people expect more of an extended universe. They expect more thought put into a larger world than maybe movies have done in the past and stories. But one thing I wanted to say is that something I think we can learn as writers is, because we talked about it just a little bit, is that they had this amazing idea, and I don't know which came first, but they had this amazing idea, and just by itself it would have been fun. But what made the amazing idea even more amazing, and is what's going to make it last, is that they dealt with a very real issue of grief.
Right.
Like the fact that this was not just a fun way to tell a story, or a creepy way to tell a story, or an interesting way to tell a story. It was that, but at the core was still this emotional reality of grief. With it starts out with Monica and her losing her mom after the 5 years, and she comes back and all that stuff. Like there's this theme of grief, and so that helped it make sense that Wanda would look to the things that were familiar and comfortable to her and nostalgic to her, because that's what people do with grief, right?
That's how they cover up.
They try to find safe spaces. They try to do all this stuff. And so, and there was, I forget which episode it was, but the commercial that was the drug commercial.
Yes. Nexus.
The Nexus commercial was one of the most amazing commercials. Because it was like, you don't ever, like you don't want to, you might have to actually feel your own feelings, instead of medicating it. And oh my gosh, man, like it was so real and powerful. Like when we were sitting there watching it after it was done, I was like, holy crap, that was intense.
Right.
It was amazing.
also deep as well, because Nexus, it did had a tagline: "Feeling your feelings, facing your truth, because the world doesn't revolve around you, or does it?" But the Nexus itself is something from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It talks about the Nexus of all realities, which is a gateway in the Marvel comics that basically gives access to all possible realities. And there are beings called Nexus beings. And one of them, which a Nexus being in the Marvel Universe and comics, is a group of individuals that can actually, they have ties to the multiverse and can actually affect like everything within that universe through themselves. One of the Nexus being is Kang the Conqueror, which has been reported. He's been casted with an actor in the upcoming movie Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania is what it's called. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania.
However you say that.
So the bad guy is this Kang the Conqueror, who is known to be a Nexus being. So that's one setup there that could be, but also Wanda herself in the comics, as far as Earth 616 comics, which is different than the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Here it's a different Earth 199999 or whatever. But in the comics, Wanda is a Nexus being.
Yeah.
And she actually has ties to all of the the magic within that universe. Yeah. So it's much deeper when they put in that Nexus. You start going, hold on, wait a minute. Yeah. What are they seeding here?
Yeah. Well, they're obviously bringing in the multiverse. I mean, that's the point of the Doctor Strange movie. That's going to be the point of the Spider-Man movie. They're bringing in all the different Spider-Men and the actors, and they're bringing in a lot of those guys that they can, and the villains. So they're going into the multiverse, and my guess, and this was my guess even before Endgame. Mm-hmm. I thought they were going to do something with bringing, the way they brought everything back, that they would bring in some level of multiverse,
right?
And that's how they were going to get the X-Men and mutants into the movies, into the MCU. They still might, but I don't know if that's exactly what they're setting up. But that's my theory.
Let's talk about that red herring that WandaVision threw at us, and got everyone excited, and then burst our bubble.
Yeah.
Her brother, Pietro. She talks about him, and he was in Age of Ultron, and he got shot by one of those drone planes flying by. He died, and basically in this, she's talking about her brother, and then her brother shows up at the door, but he's cast as a different Quicksilver from the X-Men movies, from the mutant universe. So people are looking at this other guy that played Quicksilver, Pietro, and saying, oh my goodness, this is it. This is how they're crossing over the mutants into the MCU. Well, come to find out, no, he's just some guy named Josh Boner or whatever, who's an actor who lived next door and was being controlled by Agatha all along.
Right.
So that was kind of a disappointment, because that was one of the things for weeks. People were on the internet going, oh, this means this, and it's going to lead to this, and this is awesome. We're getting it here in WandaVision, but then it actually wasn't that big thing.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts was the Halloween episode where they had the original costumes. I love that. I mean, they did do a lot of the little things.
What a great way to bring in the comic book costumes in a not cheesy way.
Yeah, and if you've seen the documentary, the assembled documentary on it, where part of it. The actress says, "Man, if you'd asked me 5 years ago to wear that costume, I would have probably smacked you or something. You know, I would have said no way." But now, I mean, the way they did it was so fun and creative, but she says in that episode, she says, don't call me that. Don't ever. I'll never be called a witch. Don't ever call me a witch or whatever. Right. And then And so I thought well, that means they're not going to turn her into the Scarlet Witch. And then they totally did. That was what they were setting up the whole time. They were going to turn her into the Scarlet Witch.
How about Agatha in her Halloween costume dressed up as a witch before they reveal that Agnes is Agatha Hargraves, the witch.
Yeah.
That was a nice little, seated nod to her, who she would actually, the character in the show. There was a lot in the Halloween episode. I feel like the Halloween episode was where everything really started transitioning from being just like this romp through sitcoms to being, okay, now we're getting to the actual story. And the first way they did it was the Halloween episode was the 90s, the decade of the 90s. And it was done in the style of like Malcolm in the Middle, where you have the actors or the characters talking directly to the camera. So they start breaking the fourth wall in this episode. And I thought that was a great way to kind of transition you from, okay, we're not in this like campy sitcom stuff anymore. Now we're getting into the real story of what's going on here.
Well, so I remember, you and I had a conversation after whatever that episode that was for, or whatever, and they did kind of the 90s. And you and I had the discussion about what they were going to do with the 2000s.
Right.
And I said, well, it's got to be The Office and Parks and Rec. It's got to be that sort of mockumentary style.
Modern Family.
Or Everybody Loves Raymond was a huge sitcom in the 90s. That was more of a family sitcom. And they totally did a mashup of those two. They totally did like an Office, Parks and Rec, talk to the camera, little interviews. Yes. And then they would do they would do the other stuff with there was a couple moments when there was one moment when Wanda is eating and she's eating cereal or something and she touches her nose with the fork or spoon or whatever it is. And that's from Everybody Loves Raymond. The older brother that was one of his kind of tics, is when he would eat, he would touch his chin. And so there was little things like that all throughout that they were just, again, it took thought, and it took not a lot of planning. I mean, yes, planning, but just a lot of attention to detail. The songs, the theme songs were amazing.
Intro songs, yes,
and they were, again, like the nostalgic stuff they did so fun, but they were still able to modernize it enough to kind of make little jokes about men and women's roles and that sort of thing. So yeah, just a lot of the stuff that they did was really well done. But I think that they did a good job with, again, the emotional core of what was happening, because when you really started to get down to the end, they had that episode where they explored her grief, they explored her background, they explored what happened to her as a child, and what happened to her growing up, and what happened to her being experimented on, and all of that stuff. And so I really think that, as they got to kind of the emotional end of it, that they really, they kept with that theme of grief. And I wish that they had, I don't know if we're in the criticisms yet, but there's a couple of things at the end that I wish they would have.
Yeah.
They didn't have to close every loop, because I get it. They're going to connect to the bigger universe. But I still think, writing wise, they left something. They left something unsatisfied for me. Okay, go, you go first.
So favorite things about the show, I really liked the slow transition from like the I Love Lucy kind of style into, wait a minute, what is going on here? Like, why is it switching? And she's causing it. Now they're watching the show outside of it, and just that expanding view of what was going on, I thought was really cool. The thing that I keep coming back to is in the last episode or two, when Vision starts figuring things out, but he works to make sure that she's okay with him leaving another time, and works to ensure that there would be like another meeting with the modified robot guy. version of him.
The white vision.
Yeah. Which was cool. Like that bothered me a little bit because they didn't show that like it was fixed or something. Like that was a little weird, that white vision's introduction, but the whole bit of relationship there between the two was neat. And yeah, like the end was so rough because you really see like how much she's suffered in losing vision so many times, and to do it a third time, but because she couldn't let go of her grief. Like she lost so much more this time because of the things that she did rather than somebody else's actions. That was, that was gripping and thought provoking too. I appreciated that they looked at her backstory a little more because I'm an X-Men fan. That's really the only Marvel comics that I read apart from Marvel 1602 and a couple others here and there. So my familiarity with Scarlet Witch comes down to the X-Men side where she is Magneto's daughter, and then the whole no more mutants aspect.
Yes.
And I appreciated that it put a clear line that no, this Wanda is very different, which, they've been pushing at the whole time, but made it a very clear, different person. But also recognizing that power in its own way. I have high hopes for Wanda. I hope that she'll get the happy ending that she wants and deserves, and not go too deep in this evil witch persona.
Right.
Yeah, she's such an interesting character. And like, as a new mom myself, like, oh, I really want her to have those kids for real at some point, but that's probably not going to happen for her, which is, that's so heartbreaking at the same time. She had something for such a short while that she loved so much and lost it. And yeah, like you guys had been talking about that emphasis and exploration of grief was interesting and moving. And then Agatha, like, she's so cool.
Yes. Yeah. Was Catherine Hahn, I believe it is. Catherine Hahn. She really stole the spotlight in some of those episodes. To chime in on what you're talking about with the kids. So in the comics, these kids end up being actually the children of Mephisto, which is kind of like the Satan character in the comics, but I don't think that's what they're doing with this.
That's Nightcrawler's daddy, isn't he?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, I believe Nightcrawler also comes from Mephisto.
Okay.
And in this one, it seems different, but the kids, I think, are the most important part that keeps the drama there, that keeps the heartbreak there, because they are the ones definitely that she's having to give up by reversing the actions that she's doing, because they were completely created and consumed within this world that she had. And the line that she said right before she knew that they were going to vanish, where she says, "Thanks for choosing me to be your mom," was like very tear-jerking, heart-wrenching, but at the same time I was also a little confused. I was like, wait, how did they choose you to be their mom? What does that mean? What are the implications there? So like at one point I'm like on one side I'm like, ooh, what a tender moment, and then on the other side I'm like, wait, hold on, what does that mean? Like so I had this like dichotomy in my thinking. Like in the scenes I'm like trying to be in the emotional moment, but at the same time there's too much for me to look at through a critical, like a writer's perspective eye, and go, okay, what does this mean? What are they saying? And then we also get sort of that same, like, picking up in her mother's role through Rambo, through Monica Rambo. And they give you a little Easter egg of who she's gonna, or who she becomes in the series. When she first shows up to the sword base, she passes a plaque of her mom in remembrance of her, and it says her name. Hold on, I'm going to. Oh, it says Maria Photon Rambo, and when her daughter Monica goes back through the barrier after her little moon, what was that thing? A lunar driver thing. What was that? A space rover. When her little space rover plan fails, it just like slams up against the wall and then like gets rejected. But then she forces herself to walk through. And in that moment, her DNA gets rewritten and she basically obtains superpowers. That is her becoming this comic book character, Photon. They never say that. They never introduce her as that character, but that's who she is in the comic book. I'm assuming that's who they're turning her out to be, but they gave that little Easter egg in the front there. So you have a lot of these kind of mother with her children or children taking on their mother's mantle, things like that, all throughout this. And then of course we have the big love story between Wanda and Vision.
I didn't understand why there were only two options. Like for some reason, I wanted more explanation why are the only two options either I control and torture a whole town or I have nothing? Like, why are those the only two options?
Or I have to give up my loved ones.
Like, can you just do the little world and around the house? Like, why does it have to be the whole town? Like,
right.
Like maybe
now that the gig is up.
Now that the jig is up, now that you know what you've done and you didn't mean it in the beginning or whatever, which we can get to that. It was part of my criticism, but maybe you didn't mean to do it. Okay. At the beginning, but now that you understand what you've been doing, and at some point she obviously does, because when people are trying to break in, she says no. And she rewrites the show and rewinds, which was cool. I mean, that was cool stuff, but, let's talk about. I wanted to know at least some level of explanation, like because the reason why I have a problem with it or I wanted it is because I think it would have been a good further exploration into her grief, like more explaining clearly, like Vision saying, I'm not real, you have to let me go or something like to further sort of kind of help her on this grief journey about accepting what's real instead of what's fake, and all that sort of stuff. Because I mean, like, she just kind of gives her kids up really quickly. And it's like, well, I guess I can't torture people, so I have to give up my whole family. Like, I was just like, well, I wanted that to be explored a little bit more. Maybe not like a whole episode, but at least a little more like explanation there for me, because I have kids, and I'm like, I wouldn't just be okay, guys. Good night.
Thanks for choosing me.
Well, faithful listeners, that was part 1 of our writing review of WandaVision. Please stay tuned for next week. Part 2 is coming, where we will talk about some of the different criticisms that we have and some of the things that we wish they would have done differently or better. And also the future of the MCU from here. Where do they go from here? So please stay tuned for next week and part 2. And in the meantime, like, subscribe, and share. Thanks a lot, and stay inspired.